Hey everybody, and welcome back to Sweatpants BI. It's me, Sean here. I want to talk about something this week that is important not just to business intelligence job searches or analytics job searches, but any job search, and that is your resume. As I've, done an increasing number of Sweatpants BI videos and I've released my Udemy courses, I've had more and more people who are trying to break into business intelligence send me over their resumes to give them feedback and just sort of, critique it and tell them some things that they could improve in those resumes. So I thought that I'd do a video for the YouTube channel where I just kind of run through 10 pretty common mistakes that I see in business intelligence resumes and give you some ideas on how to fix them. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into number one. And number one is probably the resume mistake that I see the most often, and that is your resume is too long. And it's also too long for the wrong reasons. And what I mean here is that, I'm talking about resumes that are 6 pages, 7 pages, 8 pages. I see those types of resumes. I'm not talking about resumes that are 2 pages, honestly, even 3 pages. I would say that if you are someone who is under the impression that a resume has to be 1 page, ignore that. That is, honestly, I don't really care at all if you have a 1-page resume. 2 pages are totally great and 3 pages are even acceptable if you have a lot of compelling things to tell me about yourself. That said, I have never seen a resume that was 6 pages, 8 pages, 10 pages that didn't just start to feel annoyingly long after a while. And also those resumes are only long because the people or individuals in question, not only do they list every single job that they've ever had in their lives, even dating back to fry cook at McDonald's or Blockbuster, sales associate, which was my first job. They're listing things that are not relevant to any kind of analytics or BI or data role. But they're expecting me to try to, glean from the fact that they listed, or try to imagine from the fact that they listed those items on the resume, how those skills could possibly translate to what I'm looking for. Just keep your resumes focused at around 2 to 3 pages. Make sure that the skills and the items and the work experience and the history that you're outlining are things that are relevant for analytics jobs. And there's another annoying thing that I see people do to pad out their resume links that I'm going to talk about here in just a couple of minutes. But let's talk about a different item. Your resume is poorly formatted and or poorly structured. And I'm talking here about one specific resume that someone sent me recently to review. And this particular individual was struggling with something that I see people who are applying for BI roles struggling with all the time. They're trying to break into business intelligence or analytics or data, but they don't have a lot of experience yet. And I totally understand that because I have been there. I remember the days when I was trying to break into this, career path myself, and I had zero experience to think of. And meanwhile, I think that we all have that experience of applying for quote unquote entry level or junior level jobs. And what do? They're asking for 2 or 3 years of experience, which is total BS in my opinion. But the thing that this particular individual was wrestling with in their resume is in order to pad their resume out from 1 page to 2 pages, they were, adding spaces in between every single item, every single bullet. They were using I would say 1.5 spacing in between each line in the resume. And what happened is that it created a lot of white, empty space, especially on the first page and the top half of the first page of their resume. And I feel like that had kind of a backfiring effect on their resume. And I told the individual, don't be afraid to just accept the fact that you don't have a lot of experience. There are lots of people who are, going to make amazing BI people who are applying for their first jobs without a lot of experience. And that's just the way that the world works. You have to start somewhere. But when you add all of that, unnecessary spacing and padding to stretch out your resume to 2 unnecessary pages when really your resume has about 1 page of good content, just forward 1 page of content. While I appreciate the fact, as someone whose eyes are aging and who has to read a lot of resumes, while I appreciate the fact that your resume is nice and easy for me to read, all of that empty white space is kind of creating a visual or a mental indication to me that you just don't have a whole lot of experience. And showing someone a resume that looks empty is basically telling that person visually that your resume is empty. Now, circling back to things that make your resume too long, do not list every single DAX function that you have experience with. I don't care. Just tell me that you know DAX. That's all I need to know. I don't need to know that you have experience with calculate and all selected. If you're someone who on your resume lists 10 DAX functions, I'm going to start just wondering, well, what are the DAX functions that you don't know? And if you list some DAX functions that I know are a little bit tricky, chances are if you list them in your resume, I'm going to ask you about them specifically in your interview. Just tell me that you know DAX, and then I can, quiz you and make sure that you really know your stuff in the interview. But I can tell you that if you're someone who has 20 or 30 different DAX functions just randomly listed in your resume, I'm probably going to go straight to the next resume. To me, that's just completely unnecessary. Say you know DAX, don't list all the functions any more than if you told me that you know SQL, you would list that you have experience with select, from, group by, where. It's all implied if you tell me that you just know DAX. The next item that is very, very common, and again, this is not a business intelligence specific problem that I see in a lot of resumes, is that your resume examples just aren't very specific. So there's a big difference between telling me that you helped increase sales, or that you helped reduce customer service cases, or that you did X or Y, that you made some important part of the business go up or down, or you made it better or worse. Be specific. Tell me, to the best that you can, what percentage did you help increase sales, or what was the percentage difference in, some of those important metrics the year before you built a BI tool, or built some sort of analytics solution, and how did that number change the next, year or the following year? For one thing, I would say a lot of these examples are not going to be challenged in your interview. People aren't going to, call you out. They're not going to call your employer. They're not going to find out who you worked for and verify that you helped make, a 15, 20% difference. So there is a bit of degree of, I would say, doing your best. I'm not telling you to lie. I'm not telling you to fabricate, very, very specific solutions. But I do think that some ballparking is totally fair and to be expected. But what I really, really want to know about the examples that you're giving on your resume is where you made an impact. What part of the specific, situation or role or project did you directly take ownership for? What was your contribution, and what was the specific difference, to the best that you can describe it, that you made? The next thing that I want to talk about, if your portfolio lacks polish, that's a problem. You should definitely be scrubbing every single aspect of your portfolio before you include that link or that URL, or however you want to include that in your resume. I see all kinds of examples, and I want to be clear that this is a good thing that I'm seeing, is that more and more people are including links to samples of their work in their resume. That's awesome. That's exactly what you should be doing. And if you're not doing it in 2024, let me be clear. You're doing yourself a huge disservice. If you're submitting a resume with no portfolio, and someone is submitting a resume with similar sorts of experience and has a really awesome portfolio, you don't have a prayer. So I would say, if you don't have a portfolio, my lesson here, forget that your portfolio lacks polish. If your portfolio doesn't exist, get to work on it right now. But if your portfolio does exist, make sure that you don't go overboard with the number of examples. If you have 10 average to mediocre examples, try scrubbing that down to just 3 examples, and make sure that those 3 examples are really polished, that your data visuals and the insights and any narrative elements that you have really pop, and say something profound and interesting about the data. Make sure that you're not going overboard on the colors that you're using in your Power BI tools. Try to get those colors down to just 2 or 3, and really only use color for the most impactful or insightful parts of your data visual and your design, so as to sort of minimize the visual clutter that your audience or that your users or that someone who's looking at your portfolio needs to sort of use to process the information that you're showing them. But all the time, I would say one of the most damaging things that people can do when they're applying for a role with me or on another team where I've been called in to, kind of review the resume and the portfolio, the number one thing that I would say really damages them is if they have an unpolished or kind of sloppy portfolio with too many examples of very mediocre or even poor work. I would 10 times rather see a resume that has two super polished, super on point, super insightful, and really, I would say, in-depth Power BI tools or business intelligence tools than a whole list of portfolio pieces that maybe took the person a day, are kind of very surface level, don't demonstrate that they have a broad grasp of Power BI or data visualization or design or communication. That's really just kind of, confirming for me that instead of taking a chance on you as a candidate, you're probably not the candidate for the role that I'm hiring. So go for quality over quantity, folks. The next thing that I see people doing all the time is that they do not tailor their resume to the specific role that they're applying for. This is something that I have been guilty of, but if you want to, drastically increase your chances of getting called in for an interview, make sure that you are surfacing to the top of your resume the things that a specific job description says that they're looking for. If they say that certain skills are essential, make sure that you are highlighting that you know those skills. Don't be evasive. I mean, no one is going to know everything, right? Like if you're worried like, oh, well, I only check 70 to 80% of the boxes for this specific role, who cares? That's fine. I've never had a candidate that I've hired who has literally met every single item that I've had in the job description. Most of the job descriptions that I list are purely aspirational anyway. In other words, I'm knowing, that it'd be super great if this person had every single one of these attributes, but it almost never happens. So, as a hiring manager, I know that I want, this list of 10 skills, but I know that maybe these 4 or 5 skills are by far the most important. The next 2 or 3 skills are maybe negotiable, and the next 2 skills are not important, but they could be, really helpful moving forward, or they might be a nice to have for my role. Make sure that your resume is, sort of tailored as much as you can to the specific job description, and that you're sort of, making it easier for the hiring manager or HR or whoever might be reading your resume along the way to sort of make the mental connections between the things that were listed in the job description for that role and the things that you are highlighting about yourself in your resume. The next thing that is a huge deal breaker for me that unfortunately I do run across in this industry is that your resume just isn't authentic. If your resume reeks of being generated by artificial intelligence or GPT, or if your resume has bullets that were copied from the internet, or if just the language and sort of the style of your resume changes from one bullet to the next. In other words, those bullets read like they were written by, different people or a robot. Chances are that I'm going to copy and paste bullets from your resume, put them into Google, and see if I get multiple results. I want your resume to be authentic. I want it to help me understand who you are. I want to learn more about you and your experience and your background, and I want it to be genuine. I don't want to be cheated. I don't want to, bring you into an interview and have a situation where your resume looked stellar, but it raised some red flags, and then I call you in and I start asking questions, and I realize that you or the person that I'm interviewing doesn't really know their stuff, which unfortunately has happened multiple times where I've had candidates submit a really incredible resume, and then I bring them onto the call. And as soon as I start getting into some hard questions, that person just ghosts. I've literally had people just drop off the call, presumably because they were embarrassed or I caught them on submitting a fake resume. I will say, automatic deal breaker, people. If your resume contains things that you've just found on the internet, or if you've used some kind of platform online to generate your resume, I'm just not interested. The next item is that your resume focuses on the wrong things. At the end of the day, you want to make sure that all of your bullets are sort of tailored to what you want to do, what you've accomplished in past roles. And if you're someone whose resume is brand new and you just don't have that sort of experience to include in your resume, then you need to find either projects or things to highlight in your portfolio that allow you to kind of change the tone and content of your resume into things that are more sort of analytics focused, data focused. I understand, as someone who, like I said, it's hard out there. It's a ridiculous job market, and there are all kinds of very, very deserving and brilliant people who have no analytics or BI or data experience who are trying to break into this world, and all they need is a shot. But you have to give yourself a shot by at least helping me see you in that role. If you're someone whose resume experience just isn't there today, you need to, use companies like Maven Analytics who have like their challenges. You need to find data sets online where you can sort of flex your skills and show that you're serious about learning and that you're serious about, making the very difficult decision to learn some very technical skills that you're going to need day in, day out in roles like this. So make sure that your resume doesn't go down too many, non-relevant rabbit holes just so you can fill out a resume page. Make sure that it, above all other things, screams data. And the next one is one that I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, is typos and poor grammar. Now, of course, it can be tricky out there. I don't know what the heck I would do if I were someone who was submitting a resume or a cover letter for a job or a role that was in a native that was not my first or native tongue. But I do get a lot of resumes from someone who English is not their first language. So don't get me wrong. If you have all of the skills, and if I can see the effort to present a polished resume, we're not talking about like getting too crazy about the odd typo or the odd very, very small grammatical issue. I see that stuff all the time. That's the kind of stuff that when you're actually on the job can be edited and can be reviewed by others on your team to sort of fix and polish that stuff. So I just want to be clear. I'm not talking about like that, your resume has to be flawless. I definitely don't mean that, I need to feel like, Cormac McCarthy or Stephen King wrote your resume. I'm not trying to like read a great novel here, but I do expect to see the level of polish to where there's just been basic spell check and stuff. Obviously, if there are typos that are just radically wrong or jarring, or if there's just a very, very poor and complacent use of language, that kind of presents you as someone who's not particularly interested or serious about this role. And just if your resume is, otherwise just fairly dry, robotic, and unprofessional, that's not doing you any favors. If I have a resume over here that's super boring and expresses no real emotion or enthusiasm for BI and data, and then I have a resume over here where I can like really feel and grasp the level of excitement that this person has to working in BI and analytics, that's the person that I'm going to give the shot, especially if they have a portfolio that's just incredible and really demonstrates a ton of potential. About a year ago, I hired someone who did not necessarily have the resume that was probably ready for the role that I was hiring. This person only had a couple of years of experience, and I was hiring a role for someone that had 3 to 5 years of experience. And I still hired that person with 2 years of experience because their resume showed the enthusiasm. Their portfolio showed the potential. And then when this person interviewed, he was an absolute rock star and has continued to be a rock star. And so it ended up being a great hire, even though he didn't quite check every single box in the job description at the time, which is why you just want to make sure that, your resume is polished, but don't worry, about the odd mistakes that all resumes have. The last thing that I want to talk about is, another thing that you might want to consider that I see people doing all the time is that they only have one version of their resume. And I do feel like you're probably selling yourself short if that's all you've got is just a single version. Because especially, for me nowadays, I have all kinds of different jobs with BI or data-like focuses. Some are really heavy in data visualization. Some have more of a data engineering component. Some are maybe a little bit, sort of straddling the fence between BI and data science. And these are roles that I'm applying for. I try to keep different versions of my resume that sort of play up some of those different, aspects of my experience and my job history based on the nature of what I understand the role to be that I'm applying for. So if there's a role that I'm applying for that is super data visualization heavy, then I really play up the data visualization aspects of my experience. If there's something that requires like some data warehousing and ETL skills, then those are the skills that I play up. I also, think that it's, totally fine to play a little bit with the aesthetic and layout and presentation of your resume. I have gone back and forth over the past decade with resumes that are super, boring but professional, but just we're talking white background, black Times New Roman font, and maybe the occasional underline, but zero artistic flourishes at all. And then I have versions of my resume that have all kinds of different layout elements. They almost look like marketing collateral. And I've had success with both of them. And I've had jobs where I felt like my resume was an absolute slam dunk for that specific role, and I haven't heard back anything. At the end of the day, you as a candidate, you can't micromanage every single aspect of the hiring process. Sometimes you're just not in control, or the hiring manager and the team that are hiring for a role, they already have a candidate or two in mind. Even though you're stellar, you may never hear from them. There's just nothing you can do. But I have found some use over the years of keeping multiple versions of a resume and playing with those a little bit to see if maybe one sort of fits the moment. Maybe one resume is finding a little bit more traction in that specific moment than another version, and then I lean heavily on that one. And then, of course, always be updating and refining your resume over time. I try to revisit my resume about every 6 months. Of course, that's because I'm pretty happy with my current employer. If you're somebody who's in the job market right now, I should say you need to probably be revisiting your resume and tweaking it, if not every week, every other week, until you start getting those nibbles or start getting callbacks and figuring out what in your resume is working, and try to identify what might not be working. I'll be honest, I've had a mixed bag of success actually getting people in HR or in recruiting to actually respond to me and answer these questions, but never be afraid to ask. Assuming you can get in contact with someone, what about your resume was maybe a turnoff? What about your resume do you think could be improved? And to that matter, never hesitate to, like I said, I have people all the time that are sending me resumes on LinkedIn asking me if I can help. Absolutely, I'm happy to review resumes free of charge. If because of this video, I end up just getting absolutely slammed with resumes, I can't necessarily promise that I'm going to review all of them. But people send me resumes out of the blue all the time, asking me if I'll at least give them some feedback. It takes me about 10 or 15 minutes to run through a resume and add comments about the things that I might do differently. Once again, I'm just one opinion. My opinion on what makes a perfect resume is going to be different from someone else who's a hiring manager and who has reviewed dozens, if not hundreds of resumes. So take it with a grain of salt. I'm not perfect, but I am always happy to, free of charge, review anyone's resume who's out there. I remember once upon a time when my resume sucked, and I remember how hard it was for me to land my first BI role, and it only happened because there were people out there who were already successful who gave me some chances. So there you go. There are 10 very common business intelligence resume mistakes that I see on a pretty regular basis. If any of those items sort of resonated with you, I hope you'll be inspired to go back and revisit them in your resume. Hopefully I gave you some tips for, sort of fixing some things, or at the very least a better understanding of what hiring managers might be looking for in resumes. I know that this is not easy, and once again, I'm just one guy. Other people might have different opinions on what makes a perfect BI resume, but I do have some experience here, and I'm genuinely telling you what my opinions are. And so, like I said, hopefully you found some things that are going to help you make your resume better. I know that it's tough out there. Good luck to you if you're someone who is currently applying for jobs or who is looking to land their first business intelligence role. The only advice that I can really give you, make sure that your portfolio is polished. Keep looking for more projects and work to help flesh out your experience. And above all, just keep applying. Don't give up. That's the best advice that I can give anyone who's trying to break into a really rewarding business intelligence career. I'm Sean Chandler. This has been Sweatpants BI. Really appreciate you showing up today. If you feel like doing it, feel free to like or subscribe to my YouTube channel, and I'll be sure to try to keep more content coming in 2024. Thank you.